Good afternoon. My name is Bob Margulies. I'm former president of the Hudson County Bar, and it's my pleasure and honor to interview Judge Carmen Messano, a stalwart of our community since he was admitted in 1977. So Judge Lafayette College, magna cum laude, 1974. Boston College, 1977 graduate. And following that, you took the bar and became a lawyer. So I think you started in the prosecutor's office.
I did.
Tell us, that is always, anybody that was in the prosecutor's office, there's a camaraderie there that lasts a lifetime.
Yes. You know, I was very fortunate because in 1977 the market was kind of tight for newly admitted lawyers, and I had worked the summer before in then Prosecutor O'Halloran's office. We had quite a crew. Ed DeFazio was a summer intern, Ralph Lamparello was a summer intern, and so the three of us were there, and I truly enjoyed the work, got to see a lot of really excellent criminal defense lawyers and prosecutors try their cases. And then you know, future Judge O'Halloran called up and said, "Can you come and see me on Thanksgiving break of my last year at law school?" and offered me a job. And there were many members of my class who were a little jealous because they were having such a difficult time. But I had really come to appreciate the work that the prosecutors were doing in the prosecutor's office. So that was my first position. I was there for about 5 years under both Prosecutor O'Halloran and Prosecutor Ruvault, and then I joined the law firm that kind of turned things around for me after I.
What's the name of that law firm?
Shalgin, Camerata and O'Connor, and then eventually Shalgin, Camerata, O'Connor and Messano. Tom Camerata and I had a case where I was the prosecutor and he was defense counsel. Ron Shalgin and I had a case where I actually tried a case where Ron was defense lawyer. Ed O'Connor, who at the time had just become a state senator, was someone who I didn't know at all. And Tom and I had a conversation in the hallway at 595 Newark Avenue, and he asked me if I was interested in leaving the prosecutor's office. And quite frankly, that kind of an entree is something that happens to a lot of young prosecutors from a lot of defense counsel. But I always thought Tom and Ron were really, you know, solid people, great lawyers and solid people. And so I said, yeah, you know, I'd be interested in speaking with you about it. So I did, and then they made me an offer. And as my wife is fond of telling me, I usually make a job move and take a pay cut, which is what I did in that case. But it worked out so well for the future. And those three, Ron and Tom and Ed O'Connor, became brothers to me, really.
Well, Tom had a storied career as a defense lawyer. Eddie O'Connor as a senator and became a judge. And Ron at 81 is my partner because I'm a member of where that firm moved on.
Right.
So during that period of time, what kind of work did you do before you used your original experience and I guess some political clout and became the Hudson County prosecutor?
Yeah, well, you know, it's funny because you know, in the prosecutor's office the 5+ years that I was there, I had tried a number of cases. I would say probably 35 or so criminal trials, including a number of homicide cases. And so I thought I was a fairly, you know, good trial lawyer. But when I got to the law firm, the niche that somewhat was created was for me to do two main things. Number one, serve as general counsel to the Housing Authority of Jersey City. Eddie O'Connor was truly the lawyer in charge, but I was the one who was going to the meetings and really dealing with the authority day in and day out. And then we were able to have a lot of what was then in the mid-'80s the start of major development here in Jersey City. And so I was lucky enough and fortunate enough to end up assisting Ed and Ron, who taught me so much about land use law, really. And so that's what I kind of did. I represented a number of developers, Port Liberté Partners, Dixon Crucible downtown, and between that and the Housing Authority work, I did a lot of work that really wasn't litigation any longer, and it proved in the end to be such a valuable experience because I learned a lot of things about a lot of different areas of the law, and ultimately, being in the appellate division, that was really a plus.
So you moved on to become the Hudson County prosecutor in 1991.
All right.
For about 7 years,
Yeah,
right?
a little less, about 6.
Okay. So tell us a little about what that experience was
Well,
like. And what was the complement of criminality that?
Yeah, well, I to this day say that those years I spent as the county prosecutor were really the most satisfying years I had practicing law. And of course, the prosecutor's office in Hudson County was one of the larger offices between investigators and clerical staff and over 60 lawyers. It was really, more of an administrative task, really. I didn't try any cases while I was the prosecutor, for example. But, for me, I felt like I was directly engaging with the people of Hudson County and what were their problems. I would go out at meetings in the evening at some community association all over Jersey City, and for that matter, all of Hudson County. And I would just show up and listen to what they wanted to talk about. They would ask me questions and whatever. And I'll never forget it, but I had one reporter for the Jersey Journal come up to me once and say to me, "You came into this meeting all by yourself?" And I said, "Well, sure." And he says, "Well, nobody comes to the meetings, but the mayor, and they don't come to the meetings by themselves. They have a whole bunch of people." So I said, "Well, I don't need a whole bunch of people. You can ask me the question, and I'll try to give you the answer." So I really truly enjoyed that, and I really think that, it's interesting because when you're assistant prosecutor or the prosecutor, of course, you really have one goal, and I always tried to live by it, was to do the right thing, to do justice and do the right thing. And you've been practicing law a long time, and I had practiced in private practice for 10 years, and I felt like it was really very much a kind of a relief to always be advocating for just one thing: what was correct, what was the right result, the just result in a particular case, as opposed to sometimes having to represent a client, for example, whose position you didn't necessarily agree with, but you had the obligation to zealously advocate for it. That to me can eventually take a toll on a person. And so for me, and I would always say this to the young assistants in the prosecutor's office, you have no idea until you go out and do it and represent clients and be concerned about running the business of a law firm, etc. You have no idea how it is to just be in this office and be guided by one principle: do justice. And so I thought my time there, I really felt like I had a direct contribution to the community, and I really enjoyed the 6 years. As far as the crime, it was, Hudson County was, the most densely populated county in the most densely populated state. And, we had all of the violent crime that would be associated with all of the major urban centers. But in many ways, Jersey City was safer than a lot of the other big cities. And I don't really know why, except to say that I think you had some very good police forces, trained professional, and between that and an outreach to community leaders to try and get them to be, to report crimes, for example, and to assist in investigations of crimes and things like that. That, I think, really served the county, served the people of the county. And so It was always an interesting thing because, you know, I would get phone calls all times at night, you know, that somebody had been killed or whatever it might be. And yet, you know, it was always such an exciting time to be a lawyer. I tried to always emphasize, in the end, the prosecutor is the chief lawyer of law enforcement. So I enjoyed the 6 years, but then, you know, it came to an end, and
Well, you continued your public service as a judge. I guess you were appointed in about 2004?
no, I was appointed to the bench initially in '97.
Oh, 97.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Right.
But you served then, you've served on all the divisions,
Yes.
the 3 divisions at the trial level,
Right.
courts of matrimonial, criminal, and
Right.
civil.
Right.
You went to the appellate division,
Right.
and you ended up, your last job was the chief presiding judge for administration of the appellate division, where, talk about stray cats.
Yeah. Wow.
But you didn't only just manage, you had an active trial calendar, or appellate calendar too.
Right.
So let's start with the trial. Was there anything significant, any cases that, well, you can go back to when you were a prosecutor trying cases. Any case that stands out that was particularly interesting and maybe sort of demonstrated the Hudson County community?
Well, you know, there were a couple. I mean, you know, unfortunately, I mean, the one case that after 6 years or so, I felt was a failure. You know, it still kind of sticks with me. There was a triple homicide that took place at Lafayette Gardens. 2 young children and their mother were killed, and we never solved the crime. And so that's the kind of thing that would gnaw at you, not just me, but I mean the investigative staff and whatever. And you know, to this day, I saw an article because it was 30 years ago now that the reporters for NJ.com had gone back and tried to speak to some of the people involved in it. So you know, something like that really kind of has stuck with me, and certainly was preoccupied then. There were a number of homicide cases that I didn't prosecute personally, but I supervised. And in fact, during the initial part of my prosecutorship, we still had the death penalty in New Jersey, and so we did have a death penalty prosecution, which the trial lasted for, I would say, close to 2 years. And although the defendant was convicted, he was not sentenced to death. And you know, a number of those murder cases are cases that you kind of remember.
Who were some of the lawyers that you recall, both on the defense and the prosecution side, that you thought were left an impression? Either a good or a bad impression,
You know,
but let's talk about the good
if I can
impression.
tell you just a quick story, when I was an assistant prosecutor, in fact, I'd probably been a lawyer for maybe a year. The prosecutor Howland signed me to go to the municipal court in Jersey City and screen the cases. There was no central judicial processing court at the time, and I was assigned there. The judge was Judge Zampella, Eddie Zampella, who was a character in his own right, and a Hudson County character in his own right. And an arrest was made of a drug arrest, and the police officers had come into the courtroom and actually said to me, "We're getting cooperation from this guy, you know, we want you to set a lower bail on him, or recommend a lower bail," and so I did. Was somewhat unusual that the police officers who made the arrest were in the courtroom the next day, but you know, it wasn't really it's not that it never happened, so we did that. Anyway, long story short, those 4 police officers ended up being indicted themselves, right? And the guy who they were supposedly getting to cooperate was actually an FBI informant. And so the case was tried in front of a wonderful judge, Joe Thuring, really a fantastic judge, by then assistant prosecutor Tom Oliveri, Chancery Judge here, obviously Judge Oliveri. And the four defense lawyers were Dennis McAlevey, Peter Willis, Lenny Myerson, and Sam DeLuca. And I was called as a witness in the case. So, believe me when I tell you, my conversation with the police officers was about 10 minutes long, if that, right? And I just told you everything that happened. I was on the witness stand under cross-examination for 2 whole days. And when you've been examined by those 4 criminal defense lawyers, each
Some of the best in the business.
Certainly the best here in Hudson County, among the best. I would include Jerry Miller, of course, in that crowd also. But I mean, and each with their own style. Who was bombastic, who was who was just a kind of flashy questioner, and so I learned a real.
So
lesson.
bombastic was Dennis, flashy was Peter.
You're right. Sam DeLuca was the most. He was really mild mannered. He'd get you to try and agree with something in cross-examination in a very nice tone and whatever. And Lenny Myerson was a real tenacious, not bombastic like Dennis, but a tenacious kind of pit bull to get to his point. So I sat through 2 days of cross-examination with these 4 fantastic criminal defense lawyers, and I really learned a lesson. I learned many lessons there. So, but I think they were all great lawyers. I think some of the prosecutors were wonderful lawyers. I mean, I saw Judge DePascal try a criminal case. He was the deputy first assistant prosecutor.
And he became the prosecutor.
And he became the prosecutor. My predecessor was the prosecutor. Fantastic, a fantastic lawyer. Like so prepared. Dennis McGill, who was a public defender for many years, was a person who really taught me trial preparation. How he would have a police report and have different colored highlighters for the points that he wanted to make, and he kicked my tail in two trial cases that should have never been lost, but he won them. So there were great lawyers, and then when you become a judge, I think especially my first assignment was civil, so I got to see a bunch of very good lawyers there too. Judge Mariso tried a case in front of me. I was defending in a automobile accident case. He was fantastic. Joel Lehner tried a malpractice case in front of me. I thought he was a fantastic lawyer. A real wonderful.
He had the way with words.
A wonderful approach to the jury. That I think the talent of the bar in Hudson County is just it's astounding, I think. And I think in every division I sat in as a judge, it was always amazing to see the talent and how good the lawyers were.
Now, in the appellate division, it is a grind. There's a massive amount of work. Tell us what it's like and how you managed it before you became the administrator.
Yeah. So I always tell the story that, I was not an appellate lawyer as a practicing lawyer. I probably argued 3 appeals in my 10 years as a practicing lawyer. So when I became a trial judge.
Well, first, how did you become an appellate division judge?
Well, that's an interesting story because after being on the trial bench for about 9 years and having sat criminal, civil, and family, I served as civil PJ for a couple of years before I went to the appellate division, and frankly, I found the civil presiding judge's job to be a very frustrating job. I tell people the job involves saying no about as often as you possibly can. No, you can't have an extension of discovery. No, you can't get an adjournment. You know, it's very, very, to do the job well, in other words, to manage the calendar well, is having to tell the lawyers frequently that they can't have what they're asking for. So after a couple of years of doing that, I said to Judge Calipoli, who at the time was the assignment judge, and he had asked me once before, did I ever want to go to the appellate division, let him know, and I had always said no. And so I said to him, I'm ready. if there's a way for me to be considered for the appellate division, please. At the time, it was Judge Stern was the presiding judge for
Ed
administration.
Stern, another Hudson County
Another
prosecutor, right?
Proudly says his time as Hudson County first assistant prosecutor under Jeff Calkin was some of the greatest time he had as a lawyer. And so in 2006, I was able to go to the appellate division as a temporary assignment. Thankfully, that worked out. But the workload in the appellate, you know, I never knew really how they did their work. As I said, I only argued a few cases there. And if as a trial judge they affirmed me on a case that went up on appeal, I thought that they were really smart. But if they reversed me, I would say,
what happened?
They don't know what the heck they're talking about. So that's, you know, that was
your perspective.
That was my perspective, right? Forget about how much work they got. You know, if they got it right, they're great. If not, anyway, you know. So, you know, as soon as I got there, I realized, and I had great. I always tell people I had, in the first year I was there, I had Judge Mary Catherine Cuff, Judge Ed Stern, and Judge Dorothea Weffing as
another Hudson County lawyer.
As the presiding judges of the part that I was sitting on for 4 months at a time. All three of them ended their career sitting in the Supreme Court temporarily assigned. So, I mean, if I couldn't learn how to be a halfway decent appellate judge under their tutelage,
shame on you.
Shame on me. You know, hang up the spikes, I shouldn't be a judge. So you know, the thing about the appellate division, and it remained true during the 17 years I was there, is it's a tremendous amount of reading, it's a tremendous amount of writing. The writing is a process. I think it does get easier as you go along. And if you wrote as a trial judge, which I tried to do a lot of my motions in civil, I would try to write the decision ahead of time. Then I think you get more proficient at it. The reading aspect of it, you know, is another whole thing. I mean, it's just a huge time constraint. You have to make time to do the reading. And
you're reading both records and briefs.
Correct. And you know, I would tell, as people would come onto the appellate division, part of my responsibilities were to try and give them orientation to what the process was. And I would tell them, you know, you start with the briefs, right? Keep the record over here if you need to see something that everybody is saying is the most important aspect. This is why the case should be reversed or affirmed. Then you pick up, you know, the trial transcript, for example, or the appendix, whatever it may be, and you read that in conjunction with the brief. Don't sit down to read the brief and the entirety of the record, because you'll never get done. You just simply won't get done. So it's a lot of work. I think I became, and I think most people do become more proficient and efficient as they sit on the court.
But tell us, how many appeals a week?
Well, when I started out in the appellate division, we were doing 4 opinions per calendar, per judge. We were sitting in the summer for 2 weeks when you were supposed to make sure all your opinions were obviously written for that year. And we were sitting 2 weeks and getting 5 more opinions per week. So that's 10 in the summer, and 28 weeks of 4 opinions is, I don't know, what's that, 111 or something like that. So you end up writing in the course of a year somewhere between 125 and 140 opinions. Now, not all of them, require the kind of,
But you're also one of a panel, so you're reviewing other people's work too sometimes.
right, and as you graduate, seniority in large part ruled what happened in the appellate division. And so, as you became more and more senior, you would eventually be in charge of a panel as a presiding judge. And that would mean that you were reviewing all of the other three judges' opinions, reading them, editing them, commenting on them, and doing the calendar, for example, is a major part of the job, was to say, if this appeal required 3 judges or only 2 judges. The court will say it'll be decided by 2 judges, and in the court's discretion, a 3rd judge. So, that requires you, as the presiding judge of the court, to at least look at the briefs for every case that's on the calendar, and maybe not read them from cover to cover, but certainly read some of the preliminary statements and some of the points that are raised in the table of contents, and then decide whether this was something that was going to require 3 judges or could be handled by 2 judges, and then make the assignments yourself. So that's probably a day and a half of work, I would say, out of the week, and then trying to write 4 opinions on top of that. It was a 7-day-a-week job. Now, of course, as you probably know, since the pandemic, the level of appeals has really dropped drastically. We were really down, I would say, by 40%. And so, right now, the judges in the appellate division, and for the last year that I was there also, we were down to three opinions per week per judge. So it's 25% less. And, nonetheless, it's like, water seeks its own level. Sometimes somebody can stretch out 3 opinions in the time that you really had expected them to do 4. And I know expediency of appeals is something that all the lawyers who do the appellate, who bring an appeal, really, would hope that would be, a target that would accomplish more proficiently or not. But
Now, along with all of this, you also you received the Guarini Lifetime Achievement Award in 2023 by the Hudson County Bar. You were chair of the Supreme Court Advisory Committee on Judicial Conduct. That's a job to manage the judicial side of all the problems that judges can bring to you.
I'm doing that now, yeah.
You were chair of the Supreme Court Committee on Evidence. You were a member of the Supreme Court Committee on Civil Practice. You were a state representative for the board of directors and on the board of directors of the National District Attorneys Association, and secretary of the County Prosecutors Association of New Jersey. So, and besides that, you did a bunch of teaching too.
Right.
I mean, how did you fit this all in?
When I lived in Jersey City for 20 some odd years, downtown, and in the 80s and into the 90s and when I eventually moved out, downtown was kind of like a germination destination. You can see now, of course, what downtown Jersey City is, but back then, things were just starting to happen. The artistic community was just starting to happen. Jersey City Museum, which I served on as president of the board for a while in the 80s. There were a lot of people, the so-called gentrification of downtown had a lot of pluses culturally and otherwise, had a lot of minuses in other respects. And so it was something that I wanted to be involved in. So serving on things like the Ken Mayer Alternate High School in downtown, the Jersey Museum, things I wanted to do to just remain active as I could in the community. How did I do it? My wife was very active publicly too. The two of us would kind of spur each other on to join a board or stay active in the community, or go to this particular showing of a play.
How did that affect your perspective as a judge? In other words, being an active part of the community in an urban area that was changing.
Yeah. Well, I think it made me a better judge. I think it gave me an appreciation of people's everyday lives. And, you know, I've always been a great believer, in part because I know that, you know, where I came from in terms of my mom and my mother and my father. You know, I think the goodness of people, litigants who come to court, for example, to be able to appreciate everything that goes on in their lives when they're in front of you, I think just, you know, makes you a better judge. It's easy if you don't understand all of the hardships that some people face to judge them, you know, harshly. And that's because you've been given the benefits of a lot of things, quite frankly, that they haven't. So I think it was a good experience living downtown Jersey. I'll tell you my funny story on the side. My father, when I told my father, who had moved us out of Jersey City when I was a little kid, I told him I was getting married to my wife, and she was already living downtown, and I was moving downtown to a home that she had, and that's where I was going to be living. And he said to me, if somebody told me I sent my son to law school for 3 years so that he could move to downtown Jersey City, I would have told them they were crazy. Because he remembered downtown Jersey City from the 30s and 40s when he was
the goal was to leave.
The goal was to get out. And so, you know, and back in those days, 84, 85, things were still kind of happening in downtown Jersey City. And so, in his mind, it was like not a very safe place to be, you know. So, it's funny. It's funny that, you know, you go through that and you can appreciate it, like I say. When you're walking the streets, as I would do, you know, I remember as the prosecutor, I would be shopping in ShopRite, like Sunday morning, let's say, Metro Plaza, downtown Jersey City. People would come up to me, I think about this now, people come up to me in the aisle and say to me, aren't you the prosecutor? And I'd say, yeah. And they'd want to tell me something, you know, like the street corner's bad or whatever it might be. But, you know, I think all of that really, you know, factored into me being much more appreciative of what the actual lives are of people who you're supposed to be serving.
How has the law changed in the last 47 years? And do you have any predictions of what the next 10 years is going to be like?
I think, well, the law, a substantive law, I think, you know, the criminal code, for example, as currently exists, came into effect in 1979. I was a trial assistant prosecutor, so I learned all of that. So the codification of laws, not just in the criminal field, but, well, you know, across the spectrum, has just is a trend which I'm not really sure is all that good of a trend, because quite frankly, I'm not sure the legislature can think of every single thing about a law. So to make it understandable and to make it enforceable and to make it practical. So that you know, big trend in the law is something which you know, as judges, especially in the appellate division, we were called upon many times to interpret statutes that had never been interpreted before because it was just recently enacted by the legislature, or consider some regulation that was adopted by an agency. So that kind of codification of all of the controlling law, I think, is a trend that certainly has increased over 47 years of me being a lawyer. The other thing I think in terms of the practice of law is I think it's become a harsher place for lawyers. You know, my breaking into the law, especially here in Hudson County, this was another great trait, I think, of Hudson County lawyering was that people treated each other, lawyers, prosecutors, defense lawyers, both sides of a civil case, whatever it might be, with a great deal of respect and appreciation. And, you know, I don't think it was necessarily like that all over the state. I didn't practice in a lot of other counties, but I don't think it was like that in a lot of other places. And I think overall it's become a harsher kind of thing. And then the other thing that bothers me, of course, about it is I would say to sometimes when I go speak to a bar association or a lawyers club or whatever, I would say, you know, they call us sometimes counselors at law. Counselors are supposed to counsel.
Be advisors.
Exactly. So if you are going to tell your client, you know, somebody wins, somebody loses in trial court, the person who loses, they want to take an appeal, right? Unless you understand how few cases are reversed on appeal, unless you understand that if you think the judge made a mistake, for example, in admitting this piece of evidence, and you understand, and you think that's going to get you a reversal, unless you understand that that's a decision we review at a high level of discretion to the judge, unless you counsel your client about the likelihood of success instead of just signing up the retainer agreement to take the appeal, you're not doing your job. And that I think is, and I understand this, I mean, look, the business of law is in many ways like every other business, in the sense that, you know, there's a bottom line to practicing. But I've always viewed what we do as counselors and as having a special obligation to the client. I know you understand this, of course, but I mean, it's not. I'm not really sure that's gotten through to the younger generation of lawyers.
So what last important thought do you have as a tried and true Hudson County lawyer and judge?
Well, listen, I feel blessed that I got to practice here in Hudson County. I feel blessed that I got to work with Hudson County lawyers of all kinds and in all of their various practices. I think I learned so much because they were such excellent teachers. And I think that much of the fact that this county is what it is, a diverse place, has led to the lawyering and hopefully the judging that goes on here as being, you know, the best the best it can be. I think it tries to strive to being just, and that's really what it's all about.
Thank you so much, Jim.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it.